Let's get to work, strike team.
Weaver. Our disruptor satellite has good alignment. Ready to breach.
Our team's en route to the uplink. We'll bring the dimensional disruptor online.
Dead meat dropped.
Come on.
Setting waypoint.
Thank you for connecting to my computer.
But in that, it kind of makes you wonder, how did they track that tanker? And it could have very well been that one radar site. They could have picked up on emissions from that radar site, realized it was in action, and decided that since they're using that area of the Gulf of Aden to target vessels, that we'd go ahead and essentially blind them in that area. Now, I don't know if we blinded them with the other radars. There's a number of coastal radars across Yemen, going up the Gulf of Aden, and of course up through the Bab el-Mandeb into the Red Sea. I don't know how many of those are still operational, but it would make sense that those would be high priority targets for us to take out, but make it impossible for them to track ships. If you can't track a ship, it's very impossible. It's very difficult to target a ship if you don't know if it's there, and that would be the idea.
You know how we heard in that last report, John Kirby saying that they're not interested in a war with Yemen. Can we take the second strike as just retaliation for what's happening in the Red Sea, or
neutralized.
Oh, I pushed the wrong button.
Drop. Enough of your moan. Splash.
Enemy hind identified. Engagement is your call.
Here's KIA. fragged. Target eliminated. That's what you get. Right clear. Setting waypoint. kill's a kill. Setting waypoint. Setting waypoint.
Power on. The Bluetooth device is ready to pair.
What were the issues that Taiwanese voters were most concerned with, and what did those issues say about the fact that William Lai has won?
Well, Taiwanese voters in this election, as with every presidential election, were concerned
The
about
Bluetooth device is connected successfully.
on presidential elections. The relationship with China is always a key issue, and that was certainly the case this year. Over the past year or so, the Chinese government has been increasingly aggressive in its coercive actions towards Taiwan. And so voters and the parties themselves made that a key issue. The KMT cast this election as a choice between war and peace. A vote for the KMT is a vote for peace with China. They said a vote for the DPP is a vote for war. Whereas the DPP cast this as an election that was a choice between democracy and authoritarianism, the rising China, sort of specter of authoritarianism looming over Taiwan. But those weren't the only issues, basically on the ballot this year. The economy, unemployment, and high home prices were also very much on voters' minds. Now, the fact that the DPP won, part of that has to do with the fact that this year, for the first time, there was a very significant third party on the ballot. That's the Taiwan People's Party and their candidate, Ko Wen-je. And Ko Wen-je got more than 20% of the vote, which is unprecedented. Now, he was polling mostly from the KMT. So if the TPP had not won, then it's possible we would have seen a KMT victory. What that says is that the KMT itself is not speaking to Taiwanese voters. They still say that a close relationship with China is the best way to guarantee Taiwan's security. Most Taiwanese voters, or many Taiwanese voters, just don't feel that that's true anymore.
How markedly is this going to affect cross-strait relations?
Well, at the end of the day, here are the facts. China wants to unify with Taiwan, and Taiwan doesn't. And, regardless of how the voters in Taiwan vote, that's not going to change, which means there is going to inherently be some level of tension with China. But what the voters were looking at is, a continuation of the past 8 years of DPP rule. Now, the DPP is a party that China has cast as a separatist or independence party. In fact, when Tsai Ing-wen was elected, the current president in 2016, China cut off all formal communications with Taiwan, and since then have steadily poached Taiwan's remaining diplomatic allies. Now, Taiwan has just about 12 to 13 remaining countries that recognize it formally diplomatically. If the KMT had won, it's possible that Beijing would have toned it down a little bit. But what's true is that the KMT, their position isn't unification with China. The DPP's position isn't unification with China. And so even if the KMT had won, there would still be this kind of fundamental tension.
What do we know so far about how China is reacting to William Lai's victory?
Well, what they've said this past week is that they will never compromise on their belief that China must unify with Taiwan. Frankly, they really hate William Lai. They have branded him as a, quote, separatist through and through. Now, what we're expecting is certainly a very strong verbal denunciation from Beijing of the results of today's election. Analysts tell me that we are not expecting, at least not right now, we're not expecting massive military drills like we saw after Nancy Pelosi visited in 2022. One reason for that is that the legislature is how it's going to, kind of how the pieces will fall, isn't quite set. Now, the DPP did not gain a majority, but neither did the KMT. The TPP has a significant chunk of the party vote that will give it seats in the legislature. That means the DPP and the KMT are going to be vying for the TPP's support. And in this kind of mix, it's likely that Beijing does not want to so frighten Taiwan's residents that there's an outpouring of support for a DPP, TPP kind of partnership in the legislature.
I also want to ask you about what this means for the U.S.-China relationship. Does it have repercussions, sir?
Certainly. The U.S. is a very important player in this nexus here, this China-Taiwan U.S. nexus. The U.S. is Taiwan's most important partner and its strongest defender, even though the U.S. does not have official relations with Taiwan. Now, in the past week, there was a Chinese official delegation to the U.S., and there were high-level meetings between top Chinese diplomats and Biden administration officials. And it's likely that what was one of the key topics of conversation on both sides this week was, how are we going to maintain this very delicate stability that we have attained in the U.S.-China relationship over the past few months, regardless of what happens in Taiwan? Because, here's what's at stake. This could easily escalate, as the China-Taiwan issue is one of the most dangerous flashpoints in the Indo-Pacific region. And so we are watching this very carefully to see if what's happened today in Taiwan does throw off that balance between the U.S. and China.
Bethany Allen Abrahamian, thank you so much for joining us and breaking this all down for us.
Thanks for having me.
This is a CBS News special report. I'm Nora O'Donnell in Washington, and as you can see, we are just moments away from what could be the final January 6th hearing. We expect to hear stunning new evidence today, also see never before seen video, and we are just learning that the Secret Service has turned over more than a million records, documents which could give some very important context about January 6th and the days leading up to the riot. It's also important to remember what these hearings are about. Did the President of the United States, Donald Trump, conspire to overthrow the government? Now, the committee, I should say, has been hoping to prove that he did. Also note the backdrop of today's hearing. It's important, too. We are just a few weeks away from the midterm elections, and the January 6th committee believes there is an ongoing threat to democracy. We have our team of correspondents who has been diving into all the new details that we're about to hear. Let's bring in senior investigative correspondent Catherine Herridge. This has been this outstanding item, the cooperation of the Secret Service, even though they've turned over more than 1 million documents. Is it what we want?
What the committee investigators wanted were the text messages, sort of the real-time communications on January 6th. What they got in the end was over 1 million records, including emails, and my contacts say it builds this mosaic of what was happening leading up to and then after January 6th, specifically the potential for violence, and that it was understood that the president's supporters were armed that day. And in the last 2 minutes, Nora, we have some new information that there was a specific warning to a member of the president's security detail that the situation was unraveling, and they wanted confirmation that President Trump would not travel to the Capitol as the riots unfolded. Right. What did the president know? What did the team around him know? Why did they fail to prevent this violence? The bigger questions here still remain, John.
They do, and what's so important about the Secret Service is that it corroborates testimony of previous witnesses. So what you want to do in these instances is to get as many people telling you the same story as possible, and these are the ones who are telling this key thing, which is that the president knew there was hot danger and did not only do nothing about it, he welcomed it.
Let's listen now to the chairman of the committee, Benny Thompson, Democrat of Mississippi.
Would wrongly assume that the committee's investigation was a partisan exercise. That's why I asked those who were skeptical of our work to simply to listen to the evidence, to hear the testimony with an open mind, and to let the facts speak for themselves before reaching any judgment. Over the course of these hearings, the evidence has proven that there were multiple multi-part plan led by former President Donald Trump
Tagged
to
him.
overturn the 2020 election. Donald Trump lost his bid for re-election, as shown from the testimony of some of the president's closest allies and advisors. Donald Trump really lost. Despite this knowledge, Donald Trump went to court to contest the 2020 election, and he lost in court. The Electoral College met and declared Joe Biden the winner, yet Donald Trump continued to pull out all the stops in his attempt to stay in power. But Donald Trump proceeded to do after the 2020 election is something no president has done before in our country. In a staggering betrayal of his oath, Donald Trump attempted a plan that led to an attack on a pillar of our democracy. It's still hard to believe. But the facts and testimony are clear, consistent, and undisputed. How do we know this? How have we been able to present such a clear picture of what took place? Because of the testimony we've heard and that we've had presented to you through these proceedings. Because of the documentary evidence we've gathered and also made available directly to you, the American people. When you look back at what has come out through this committee's
When I first started EVE, I was a minor, and I was really tired of getting blown up by people all the time.
Prehistoric sculptures of reptilian beings.
Something significant happened. Something that would alter our understanding of human history.
Weird, elongated skulls. Nearly 4,000 years old. It would seem that those elongated skulls were people who were somehow half alien, half human. And ancient myths of small gray beings with large heads and black oval eyes.
There are descriptions of gray beings going back hundreds, if not thousands of years.
All around the planet, ancient evidence points to strange otherworldly visitors. This data suggests, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that physical extraterrestrials visited Earth in the remote past. Millions of people around the world believe we've been visited in the past by extraterrestrial beings. What if it were true? Did ancient aliens really help to shape our history? And if so, might science finally reveal the truth behind the mystery of the graves?
Enemy deleted.
Roswell, New Mexico, July 3rd, 1947. A flash of light streaks across the sky and crashes in the desert near the Roswell Army Airfield. Rancher Matt Brazel hears the impact and investigates the next morning. He reports what he finds to authorities.
The thing with the debris was like nothing I'd seen before. And the rancher reported finding what looked like initially foil-like material that, when it was scooped up and collected, it had these strange properties like memory metal. In other words, it would resume its original shape when it was crumpled up, if you like. This sort of suggested the possibility that something very strange had come down at Roswell.
And they find 5 alien bodies. Alien because they do not look human. Using hermetically sealed, smaller coffin-sized boxes, these bodies were transported and looked at, physically analyzed, and then shipped off to various areas of classified research.
They're described as the classical gray, 3.5 working tall, black wraparound eyes, slits or long arms, depending on which description, between 3 and 5 fingers.
At first, U.S. military personnel announced that they had recovered debris from an unknown spacecraft. But later, they reversed
the military completely changed its story and said, sorry, we made a big mistake, it was just a weather balloon. But of course, no statement was made as to how trained local personnel couldn't tell the difference between a flying saucer and a weather balloon.
But why did the military change their story? Was it because they found something else? Something otherworldly, as ancient martyrs believed?
People who claim to have been associated with the crash at Roswell claim that there were several alien bodies recovered. It's very strange that they would talk about aliens. We also know that the mortician was called, and that they were asked to come up with small little caskets. Something obviously happened at Roswell. What was it exactly? We really don't know, but I think it was out of this world.
This is kind of the core of the Roswell legend. Our government, which is in a democracy supposed to be of the people, by the people, for the people, is covering this up. The second thing that is implicit in this legend is, of course, that extraterrestrials have been visiting the Earth.
But these alien beings did in fact crash at Roswell. Who are they? And what do they want? September 19th, 1961. According to news accounts, Betty and Barney Hill were driving through New Hampshire late at night when a large flying saucer rapidly approached them and then hovered over their car. They saw strange figures through the windows of the craft. And mysteriously, the couple also reported complete memory loss of the 2 hours immediately following the encounter. No one really knows to this day what Betty and Barney Hill saw. However, the details of their case do reflect on various other versions of alien abduction. I say alien abduction because some of the pieces of information that they discuss, the loss of time, seeing beings that actually came out of this craft and associated and interacted with them, and they weren't human.
Ultimately, under hypnosis, they recall being brought out of the car and taken aboard the ship. And it was a legitimate abduction. And that Betty pleaded with her captors, if you will, that not to harm her as she laid on this table and experiments were done on her blood. Needles being inserted into her stomach. Barney relates a number of skin samples and sperm being taken from him.
The beings described by Betty and Barney Hill fit the classic case of a grave. Now, there are variations to size and dimensions of these beings, but they all seem to have the same characteristics. Slim, spindly bodies, large oval heads, large oversized eyes.
Waypoint marked. Move.
The Hills were the first documented case of an alien abduction in modern time. But it is not the last. Since the 1960s, there have been many more similar reports. including that of Kim Carlsberg, a commercial photographer, who in 1988 claimed to have been abducted by gray aliens in the middle of the night.
We were living on the beach in Pacific Palisades, and I walked up to the window and I saw this light on the horizon that I'd never seen before. And I've been on the beach my whole life. It wasn't a boat and it wasn't a star. I just watched this craft. The next thing I knew, it jetted into the stars and disappeared. And I went to bed as usual. I woke up in the middle of the night and I was not in my bed any longer. I was naked and I was paralyzed. The beings I saw were about 3.5 feet tall. They were naked. They were off-white. They were not gray. They had huge heads, huge wrap-around black eyes, tiny little bodies. There are many stories
West
of grays
5, the disruptor satellite will reach the dark ether. Control out Apex HVT.
You're the killer on site, Strike. All Apex targets are priority 1.
See that alien hybrid babies and having those fetuses removed from their bodies and then grown on the alien spaceships. In some cases, people report going back onto the spaceship and being able to see these hybrid offspring. I was being used for my DNA. They were creating hybrid children from my eggs, someone else's sperm, and combining it with their DNA and their sperm. I would be implanted with an alien fetus, and they would leave the fetus in my body for a few months, and they would bring me back again later, and then they would remove it. It was horrific. It was terrifying.
You can't have so many people saying that they've been abducted and not have some possibility of truth in the fact. I think it's happening. I don't know if it's a hybridization for these ETs, or whether they're trying to bring these hybrids back to this planet one day when the environment changes. But, in my opinion, something very strange is happening.
There's an overabundance of testimony from just too many people who say that they remember these types of creatures and having been taken by them. I think the Greys make perfect sense. Now, the question is, where are they from?
So if you think about the gray alien, the large head, small body, why are these the aliens that are so often projected? As a scientist, you really have sort of two sides that you like to think about. One is, why do we project them that way if, they're just our projection? And if they did really exist hypothetically, would intelligent life look radically different? And I think there the answer can be very much yes.
Order your free $100 telescopes now. We are giving away these amazing telescopes to any outdoor enthusiast who...
But what can explain the similarity of the Greys described by abduction victims? And why do recent descriptions match ancient depictions of so-called sky gods found all around the world?
Confirmed.
Might they be from the same race of otherworldly beings, as ancient astronauts
Get him a tag.
Something can be said about a potential presence of Greys in the remote past, because there are some figurines and some cave drawings that look like Greys. There are some statues in ancient Sumeria, but we can also find cave drawings in Europe and, for example, in Australia, where the heads feature a triangular shape with the big almond eyes. Cave paintings in the Kimberley region of Australia, nearly 5,000 years old, could be among the earliest depictions of Greys ever discovered. According to local legends, the carvings are of ancient spirits called the Wangina, who appeared during dream time to create the landscape and influence its inhabitants.
See what you have there is a typical depiction of your Grey alien being. The almond-shaped eyes, the almond-shaped head. Because quite often you find in rock art very strange creatures there, but not necessarily the Greys.
So to have in the Kimberley Caves the depiction of the grey is really extraordinary.
The Wangina were beings that descended from the sky and essentially jump-started civilization in and around Australia. In fact, the aboriginals of today still praise those beings. And to me, that is significant because what we have here is what
Just
I
my
refer to
shitty
as
luck.
living
A pistol.
mythology. That these mythologies have been kept alive
good.
over thousands of years.
I didn't mean to
and
do
to
that.
me, there is no coincidence in that.
Mighty alien beings known as the Greys really have been visiting Earth for thousands of years, as ancient astronaut theorists believe. Perhaps the answer can be found, not in the stars, but in man's earliest depictions of sky gods.
Waypoint marked. Move.
Iraq, a region once known as Mesopotamia. Located on the east bank of the Tigris River, opposite the modern city of Mosul, lie the remains of the ancient city of Nineveh.
Find the ones who did this. I want them all dead.
6,000-year-old Sumerian clay tablets were discovered that contain the earliest known form of written records. Interpretations of the accounts engraved on the tablets speak of an alien race called the Anunnaki, who settled in Sumer and bred with humans. The Anunnaki, which comes from Sumer, our modern-day Iraq, speak of gods that literally created us, humans, in their image, after their likeness. So when we go back to some of these Sumerian epics and various texts that go back thousands of years, the Anunnaki are a great resource of realizing these were actual beings that existed. And the Anunnaki even worked with or had some relationship with the Greys. With the Anunnaki, what Anu really is description of the fact that they're linked with their created date. And in this case, Anu is linked with the constellation of Orion. Very specifically saying that these creatures come from somewhere out there in the universe and have come from there to us. When you look at the evidence, it appears that there was a number of different alien species that were coming to this planet. You have the smaller, big-headed gray aliens. You have the very tall, literal giants that were sometimes called the Anunnaki. We have other alien species that allegedly look almost identical to us. In the American Southwest, the ancestors of the native Hopi Indians believed in deities from other worlds and created illustrations of them on the canyon walls. But in some cases, researchers believe the depictions of sky gods match modern-day descriptions of the Greys.
That's why, despite the massive criminality and corruption of the Clintons, the Bidens, the Obamas, and all the rest,
In Hopi culture, there are spirits called Kachina that represent really beings from the other world. They really are a mixture of nature spirits, earth spirits. Some of them also really take on almost aspects of very powerful ancestors or gods. These are otherworldly creatures.
The translation for the word Kachina is very simple. It means teacher. The Kachina were not a part of the spiritual world, but they were, in fact, a part of the physical world. They descended from the sky in what the Hopi referred to as fiery shields. They would touch down on Earth, spend time with human beings, teach them, give them knowledge, and then they would use the same quote-unquote shields to fly back into the sky.
were physically living with them. And at some point it is said that the Kachinas took to the mountains, specifically the San Francisco mountains outside of Flagstaff, and then that later they disappeared.
The Kachinas in the Hopi culture are known as gods, and this term gods I use loosely because we now look at the information and wonder if they're possibly extraterrestrials. Now what's interesting is this theme is replicated across many different cultures. The gods come here and find our human females attractive. So this is the same thing reported by the Hopi Indians.
But if gray aliens came to Earth in the distant past and mated with humans, where is the physical evidence of this union? Researchers point to numerous elongated humanoid skulls found on several continents. Might such remains actually be of hybrid species, part alien and part human, as ancient astronaut theorists believe?
One of the things that you see around the pyramids here on the coast of Peru is that they're associated with these skulls. It would seem that those elongated skulls were half alien, half human. In fact, some of the recent DNA testing that's been done here in Peru is indicating that these people are somehow half human and have some other race.
Well, this long skulls is a phenomenon which is worldwide. We found them in Central America, we found them in South America, you find them in Egypt. So I think in the very, very beginning, these extraterrestrials, they must have had longer heads than the normal human brain.
They're found all over the globe. And we have to wonder if this was some type of either lost, advanced civilization, or were these actually extraterrestrials visiting various cultures and having similar influences. Maybe some of these elongated skulls are actually artifacts to say beings existed at one time that ancient man considered gods.
And it's once again cross-cultural. We find it specifically at a very brief period of time in ancient Egypt under Akhenaten. And specifically in Peru, an awful lot of excavations are happening, where you see strange skulls being uncovered. Specifically these skulls, which are really larger than they should be. It seems very straightforward that somehow the gods were visually linked with elongated skulls.
Might elongated skulls, some estimated to be over 4,000 years old, really be evidence of the existence of gray aliens in the ancient past? And if so, could this be proof of intermingling between human and alien civilizations? For ancient astronaut theorists, the answer on both counts is a categorical yes. Perhaps further evidence can be found, not here on Earth, but on the surface of a nearby planet.
Shit. All operators down.
NASA's Phoenix lander successfully touches down on the Martian surface. And while searching for evidence of microbial life, the robotic spacecraft finds trace amounts of water frozen underneath the soil. The discovery of an element so essential to life raises speculation that Mars may have been home to alien life forms in the